Recording. Best Practices for iOS User Interface Designs by Professor Don Patterson and Sam Kaufman. One of the fundamental view controllers that's used in form-based iOS design is the navigation view controller. This plus the table view plus the scroll view probably accounts for 80 to 90% of the underlying UI controllers that are present in most apps that are out there. So using the navigation view controller is pretty straightforward. You just have to understand where to look for certain controls. And so what we want to do is we want to lay one out for you in this tutorial so you can see what's happening. So the big picture is that a navigation view controller implements a basic traversal through multiple views that are triggered by some action. Moving between views is triggered by some action on the part of a user. And it supports backlinks. So in a way, there's kind of a model here that's similar to a web browser where you click on things, you go forward through a sequence or down a path of views, and then you can return back using something that's like a back arrow. Of course, it's a little bit smoother than a web browser experience because it's a native app. So on the right here, we see an example of what we're going to try and build. A couple options for moving around, depending on what you pick as choices. We're not going to end up with exactly that, but we'll see what we get. And so there's a couple things that I'm just going to show you. It's kind of a skill-based task. There's not a lot of code involved with it. It's a lot of UI selection elements. So we're going to walk through the creation of it. So we're going to show you how to construct one. We're going to try and do kind of a tree-based one. We're going to show you linking with segues. That's how you get that movement from one view to another. We'll show you about adding navigation bars, and we'll do it from the bare bones view controller model. We'll add prompts, and we'll add back buttons, and we will show you a little bit about alignment to layout guides along the way. All right, so let's start by constructing one, and we'll link it together with segues. There are a couple different templates that will start you off with more of this code already put together, or more of the connections already put together, but we're going to start pretty basic. So let's go to Xcode. Let's go to Xcode. All right, we're going to make a new project, and our project is going to be a single view app. Same thing we've been working on for a while, and we will call it the nav view controller demo. Okay, and it's Objective-C, and we're not going to be using core data for this demo. So go to our next screen. We'll keep it here in our local repository, and we'll maximize our window, and we'll go to our storyboard. Now, almost all of our work is going to be done in the storyboard for this assignment, and so we'll need also to see our view hierarchy here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to ditch this view controller to start with. I'm going to go ahead and delete it, so we start with nothing on the screen. And instead, what we're going to bring up is we're going to bring up the navigation view controller. Now that we have the navigation view controller up here, we also want to identify it as being the place where we're going to start our project. So we're going to click our navigation controller, and we are going to click the properties, and we're going to click is initial view controller. So that checkbox says, hey, when we start our app, which view are we going to start with? And so in this case, we're going to start with our navigation controller. Now, when I drop this navigation controller onto the screen, I got this window, and this window here represents just kind of a higher level container. It's not something that you actually see. It represents a parent of all the different views that are going to be linked together in this sequence of views. And so this is a place where controls for that are common to all the different navigation views are kept. This here is called a segue. Or this is called a relationship in this case because it's got a relationship icon, but our segues will be the same. And when we drag our navigation controller out, it gives us a table view as our initial root view controller. We're not actually going to really use the features of the table view the way we did in our previous sequence of in the previous sequence of videos we had. But what we'll do is we'll use the table view as a UI component to just have like a sequence of buttons. And to do that, we're going to select our table view, go ahead and expand it, and we are going to identify that our content is not going to be dynamic prototypes, meaning they're not going to change based on callbacks and delegates. They're just going to be static cells. And when we do that, it immediately gives us 3 different static cells to our table view, and those are just going to be things that we can, that we can use to put buttons into. So I'm going to put no, actually we are going to click through, so I'll go ahead and keep the default selection method for it. And I'm going to change the name up here of our root view controller. I want to change the name of that. Let's see. I don't like the fact that it says root view controller. That's sort of depressing. So let us find where we have that setting. Finding the settings for this is like 90% of the challenge. Root view controller. There we go. This is the top. So that's where we're going to start, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And what we need to do is we need to put a couple other places where we can go when we click on elements, things that will have this navigation controller component. So let's add 3 view controllers to our world. 1, 2, 3. And let's see if we can kind of line them up over here so that they are going to match our buttons more or less, give us a little screen real estate. All right. All right, so in order to link these in to the succession of views that we'd like to see, what we need to do is we need to create a segue. And so we're going to do that by selecting our table cell that we're interested in, the one that we want to, when we click on it, we want to move to the next view. We indicate that by control dragging from our table view to our destination, so our view controller in the upper right. And when we do that, we'll get a selection of what we want that relationship to be. There's a lot you can choose from, and you can see some of the things we've talked about from a high level from the human interface guidelines, but for this one we're just going to use show. And when we do show, we're going to see that we have a segue relationship here now, and we can see that that shows up in the view controller over here. And you can see that when we do that, we actually can select the segue itself, and there's a bunch of properties associated with the segue that we can leverage if we want to at some point. Now up here on the view controller, when we did that, we were immediately given this, view at the top of our bar that's going to be controlled by the navigation controller. And that's a space that the navigation controller can use to keep track of things so that there's a consistent experience of moving through the hierarchy. So into that, I'm going to put a navigation bar, and that's going, not a navigation bar, a navigation item, which is going to represent a title and the ability to move backwards if we want. And we're going to go ahead and give this a title at the top, and what should we call it? Let's pick a theme. Today I was messing around with snacks, so let's name them after snacks. So this is going to be a potato chip screen, and then we will do the same thing down here. We'll take our second button, and we will control drag our second button to this one, and we will do show, because that's what we want, and we will add a navigation item to our navigation bar, and instead of potato chips, we will say it is soda. And in the third one, we will click and we will control drag down here. We will choose show segue, and we will also add a navigation item, and instead of soda, we will say candy bar. All right. Now, it would be nice if we had some idea that when we were clicking on our table items that we were going that direction. So we're going to grab some labels, and we're going to put it into our bar here, and we will go ahead and make that say potato chip, and we will option drag to copy that down here. We'll make that say soda, and we will option drag that down to the bottom and change it so it says candy bar. Then we're going to assign some layouts to this. We'll say we want the layout of that to be, I would like that to be in the center of the container. Bam, and I'll option control equal to lay that out. And soda I will put in the center of the container, and I will option control equal to lay that out. And then candy bar, I will do the same thing. So in doing this, as I zoom out, you can see that we have, maybe, I don't know if you can or can't, we've got 3 different views that have been linked through segues from our table view, and they've created these new view controllers into which we can put other kinds of items. We can put table views or web views or map views or whatever we thought was appropriate, tab bars, toolbars. I'm going to zoom into potato chip here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a button. And we will add a just a normal button in the center here, and we will call potato chip. We'll say, let's see, we'll make an option of corn chips, and option control that. And a second choice will be, oh gosh, I don't know, barbecue chips. And we will select those 2 things, and we will ask for them to be horizontally centered. I'm not super concerned about the layout. What I want to do, though, I'm going to option control equal to, oh, okay, maybe I am a little bit concerned about the layout. I will put them, give them some constraints, give this guy a constraint, and let's lay them out and see how they come out. All right. The reason why I added those buttons is because I want to add another set of view controllers so that you can see the navigation through this system. So we're going to, once more, oh, actually what we'll do is we'll just option drag this one over, select that, select it, and option drag it. It's not letting me copy it that easily. Okay. We'll just get a new one. Get a view controller, drop it up here, another view controller, and drop it down below it. As we do that, our canvas expands a little bit, so we have a little bit more space. And until we connect it with a segue, we're not going to see that navigation bar show up. So I'm going to select the button, and I'm going to control drag to this one, and I'm going to give it a show segue. You'll see our bar, our view at the top show up. I will select barbecue chips, and I will control drop to this one, show, and a bar shows up at the top. And then I want to add a navigation item to both of these. And I want to clarify that this is barbecue chips, and navigation item up here, clarify that this is corn chips. And okay. Now if we run it, we should see a basic navigation controller that we can go forward and backward through. Let's see if we can get that. Waiting for the simulator. All right, so we're at the top, and if we select candy bar, we'll go to the candy bar view, and we get a back arrow back to this is the top. And if we go to soda, we get the same thing. We go back to the top. You can see that these are controlled by a table view. They're static. And then last we can go to potato chip. We can go to a potato chip view, and I don't know, we lost our corn chips. It must be buried underneath this element here. If we select barbecue chips, we can go to the barbecue chip page, and then go back to potato chip, and then go back to the top. So a real basic navigation controller. Let's see if we can get corn chips to come back. I'm not sure what happened there. Let's clear the constraints on that guy, and then let's be a little bit more specific about wanting to connect it to the top layout guide, keep the vertical spacing the same, and then let's keep the horizontal, let's keep it just horizontally centered. And then let's option control equal it, make sure it lays out okay. Alright, looks okay. Let's try running it one more time. Constraints are a little tricky. You can think you're doing exactly the right thing. There we go, corn chips. Maybe I forgot to hit enter or something like that. If we go to corn chips, we can go back to potato chip. All right, and then we're at the top. Okay, so what we just looked at is we looked at how you start with your navigation controller and your root control, and we linked with segues to new view controllers. And when we linked to a segue, we got a view at the top into which we could add a navigation bar. So we linked with segues, and then we were able to add a navigation bar. The next thing I want to look at is I want to look at how to add a prompt. Now, a prompt is just a little bit of text at the top that enables you to add a little bit more detail. And we'll also look at some swiping behavior at the same time, and specifically call that out in the outline, but we can do that as well. All right, so what we can do is if we go back to the top, we can say select our, let's see, we can select our navigation item, and over here when you select your navigation item, it gives you the ability to say prompt, and this prompt enables you to add something to the top that kind of appears all of a sudden. So like we can say choose your snack, and if we do that, you get this little choose your snack item at the top. And we'll go through here so that you can see how this works as you navigate through and how it animates. So prompt made with potatoes, and then corn chips made with corn. This really doesn't make sense as an information hierarchy because it looks like corn chips are a descendant of potato chips, and we just kind of demonstrated that that's not true. Oh well. All right, so let's run it in our simulator, and when we do this, we'll see the prompt show up. Taking the simulator a second to appear. Wait for it. It's a good moment to practice patience if you're an instructor. Compiling 2 storyboard files. Why is it all of a sudden taking so long? Sometimes it takes a long time because of the screen recording software. But not usually quite this long. Let's see. Nope, we're really building. Well, let's try that again. Not quite sure what's happening here. These are 2 issues. I'm just empty my trash to make sure we're not running out of disk space. What in the world? It's always something new. All right, let's try it one more time. Go ahead and go clean our project. All right, try and run it again. Okay, who knows? Had to clean the project and then wait a little bit. So wait for our simulator to come up. All right, boy, I hope it's worth it. Wait for our program to launch. All this to show you prompts. Wow, okay, so choose your snack, and then you can click on potato chip, and it says made with potatoes. You can go to corn chip, and you can see made with corn coming back. Go back, made with potatoes. This is the top, choose your snack. And you can see how kind of the animation floats in and moves in when there's a prompt and when there's not a prompt. If there's not a prompt, it goes away, and then if there is a prompt, it appears. All right, so that's the prompting behavior. Now I want to show you another behavior about swiping that's sometimes useful if you have a screen, an app that needs a lot of screen space. What you can do is you can go to your navigation controller and select that. And there's a bunch of options up here. So, one thing to notice is you've got some simulated metrics. So this screen space up here, you can set to be different kinds of default devices. So like if you set it as a 5.5, that and all of its children will look like a 5.5-inch iPhone. That's helpful if you know you're designing for that kind of a platform and you want to just work with that, that layout immediately. You can, of course, do portrait and landscape in the same way. You can have details about what kind of status bar you want. And then this one here is interesting, that you can actually have some behaviors based on how you want those navigation bars to disappear. So on swipe, on tap, when the keyboard appears, or when vertically compact. So, let's see if we can make on swipe work, and maybe we don't have anything that causes the keyboard to appear, but maybe we can make it appear manually in the simulator. So now when we run it, stopping the old version, whoa, are we stuck again? Wow. All right, we'll stop it, and we will clean our project. And we will run it. Okay, and now you can see we have the same thing, the behavior with the prompts. But this time, if we swipe anywhere in our application, the navigation bar will go away. And if we swipe down, the navigation bar will come back. Go to candy bar, I swipe up, it goes away, and I swipe down, swipe down. And it's supposed to come back, but there it is. Okay, wasn't swiping very well. Now, we can see if we can manually get the keyboard to come up. Nope, we need a text field in order to get the keyboard to come up. Right now it thinks there's a hardware keyboard and there's no reason for the keyboard to come up, so it doesn't allow it to come up. If the keyboard came up, we would also get that behavior, so when the keyboard comes and goes. Let's see if we can do that for demonstration. And we should be able to do that fairly simply just by adding a text field. Oops, where's our text field? Why didn't our text field show up? Because I didn't put any kind of constraints on it. Okay, let's try that again. Option command equal. All right, and let's also give it a width. So that, give it a width. 112 is as good as anything. Add that constraint and option command equal. Great. And now let's run it. All this to show you the behavior of the navigation bar when the keyboard is brought up. Okay, it's there. It's a horrible layout, but I can click in it, type hello, and then if I get the soft keyboard to come up, come on, there we go. The soft keyboard comes up and the navigation bar goes away. I hit keyboard too many times. Let's try again. There we go. And we can get it to come back, hit return, and we're done. Keyboard go away. All right, let's just do that again. Here comes the keyboard. There goes the keyboard. Interesting, the bar doesn't come back on its own. You have to swipe it back down. Or maybe it's interfering with the swipe. Well, let's just check that out. Let's see what happens if we select our navigation controller and only make it go away when the keyboard appears. This would be the kind of thing that would be really good to test on a real device because I don't have a lot of confidence in the soft keyboard behavior here. Okay, click here, get the soft keyboard to show up. Hello. And wait a second, and then have the keyboard go away. Nope. The swipe doesn't pull it down, so that's interesting. It only makes it go away. It doesn't make it come back. Okay, that's good to know. All right, so that is about our prompts, and that is also about the swipe to make the bar go away. And there's a little detail about back buttons I want to tell you about. Sometimes you can have a really long title, and when you move into a child container, the back can be a really verbose phrase that looks bad and takes up too much of your navigation. And so what you can do is you can manually adjust that. So you always adjust it from the parent though, which is a little awkward. All right, let me delete our text view. Let me go to our navigation control and just have the bar stay there. And so when this is the top, I'm going to select that navigation item, and here on the back button you can specify some alternate text to show when you want to go back. So here I'm going to put just top, and then over here on this navigation button, on this, instead of saying potato chip, we'll just make it say PC. So when we run our application, the back button will be altered now to reflect the alternate text that we typed in into the settings. So starting out, we've got potato chip, and you can see the back button says top instead of this is the top. If you go to barbecue chips, the default, potato chip is the back button there. So because it's set by the parent, you get potato chip. But if you go to soda, you can see the default. Okay, that's not very convincing. We don't have a default anymore because my defaults don't have children. There's potato chip. If we do corn chip, we get what we specified as PC. And if we get rid of that, we go back to our default. And we do potato chip, we get top as that, but as we go to corn chip, we get the default of potato chip there. All right, finally, I just want to point out something about the layout guides that's important, especially when you have like a table view. So go down to alignment guides. What I want to show you is that when you're on the table view, the table actually extends up underneath this navigation bar. And if you can tell, there's some translucency. You can see the color altering underneath that navigation bar. And so the table view is smart enough to know that it wants to orient itself so that the first item appears below that, but it actually scrolls up and underneath it in that way. And so when you do things like do layouts here, you want to make sure that your layout is going to this layout guide that's associated with the bottom of this navigation item. And I think when we first had our corn chip not showed up, I think the problem was that the constraint went all the way to the top rather than the layout guide associated with the bottom of this. You can actually, if you select your navigation controller, you can actually alter that behavior so that things do not extend under the top bar. So if we uncheck that, the view that's associated with the navigation bar becomes a hard view and nothing goes underneath it. You don't get that kind of translucency of something going underneath it. So here, you can't really see a difference, but in terms of the layout, the table view is just ending directly right there. And that messes with the translucency a little bit and a little bit with the behavior around swiping. Okay, so let's zoom out. So not that far. So using the navigation view controller, we created an information hierarchy. It's pretty straightforward how you do it. And it consisted of a handful of steps, but basically you link things with segues, you add information to navigation bars, you can add prompts and back buttons, and they have special guides for alignment. That's kind of nuts and bolts of navigation. Control click is your friend. Also make sure you're careful about what's selected in your view hierarchy if you want to, when you're trying to find options, because a lot of times just finding the options for these things can be the trickiest part of this kind of a layout. Okay, thanks. That's it for this lecture.